Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Verit Kogan, and I'm so delighted to introduce you today to Nic Peterson. Nic is a serial entrepreneur and the author of the book Bumpers, the framework for finding your personal abundance, maximum productivity, greatest profits, and highest quality of life. Bumpers was written in response to the recurring question, how do you get so much done in so many different industries? Similar to the bumpers you'd put up in a bowling alley, the bumpers that Nic will share with us today will allow you to play all in with 100% effort while keeping you out of the gutter. And it's really about living the life that you want to live. And I'm so excited, Nic, to have you here. From what I've gotten to see and hear, you're just a wonderful soul, a wonderful human being, and also a very wise one. And I've already learned so much from you. So I'm grateful that you are here with us today.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Me too. So, how about we get started with you telling me a little bit about like how you got to where you are today? Like, if I were to find, the 10-year-old Nic, somewhere, and who would I meet, and how did he get to where he is today?
Oh, that is a whole lot of revisionist history. I'm going to try to make myself sound a lot better than I probably was. Uh, so I'll start with the most recent story that I remember. The furthest back one is when I was 20. I had a job in a wood veneer manufacturing company, and I was new there, and everybody worked there forever. And we were walking around, and these two guys were talking, and they've been there forever. They're kind of showing me the ropes. And one of them says, I swear if we all tripped right now and just fell face first into piles of shit, somehow Nic would find gold in his. And so as a kid, I had a very difficult childhood. I never met my dad. My mom and I were not good. She was not good. Um, it's a really, really tough circumstances. And um I look back and it's like, whoa, I'm so glad I got out. There's a whole bunch of ways it could have gone that were me not getting out of that circumstance. Um, and I have a little brother and he did not get out. So looking back, there's been a version of like, wow, this kid keeps getting lucky over and over and over. And when you're a full grown up entrepreneur, then you make fun of stuff like that. Yeah, overnight success is 10 years of hard work and then boom, overnight success. But um as a kid, I put zero effort into pretty much anything and still did pretty okay. And that's not a good thing. I wish I put effort into stuff. Um and so it was a lot of that all the way through. I got into a private Catholic high school and nobody understood how or why. It was really hard. It was very expensive. Couldn't afford it. I tested into it, and nobody could understand how or why. Now, looking back, there was somebody like a guardian angel looking over that engineered the whole thing. I didn't know that till later on. So another like, oh look, Nic gets lucky again. Uh, the beginning of my senior year in high school, I was told I would not be allowed to graduate from there because to this date, I had checked the other day, 100% of the graduates going to 4-year universities. And I had like a 1.9 GPA. And they're like, we can't let you graduate here. You're going to ruin our streak. And they said, unless you get accepted into a 4-year university, no chance in hell, you have to finish somewhere else. A week later, I got an acceptance letter.
Mhm.
I've got lucky again. So I've been very, very fortunate in many, many ways. Um, and as this is happening, first business, oh, got lucky again. Second business, got lucky again. Third business, got lucky again. Um, it was after that. It was after I sold my third company. People started paying attention, like more sophisticated people. I started asking better questions. Uh, people started asking, how are you doing this? Instead of saying, oh, it must be lucky.
Mm.
Oh, lucky again. And I couldn't answer it. I don't know. Just you see it and you do it. And that went on for years until I was 29. I think I wrote bumpers when I was 28 or 29. Uh, so people have been asking for years, how did you see that? How did you do that? How did you know that would work? Uh, and I was laying in bed and I woke up at like 4 a.m. and it was like, I know. I know why it works. I
Mm.
find somehow I understand what I'm doing. And I went to the office that morning because I couldn't sleep. And that's when I wrote my book, Bumpers. It took about 4 hours. And that was just the answer to that question. Uh, so growing up, I'm a high quick start, high implementer. So I move fast and I got to touch it. I got to do it. It's always been kind of my thing. Uh, but growing up the way that I did and being fortunate to be moved around by people that cared, um, I developed kind of a an appreciation for when bad things don't happen. That's the first one. And secondary, tertiary, and subsequent order consequences. Like those are the two things that I think I picked up young that I didn't know. Um, were okay, maybe bad things not happening. Like if just less bad things happen, I'll be in a better position. And thinking really deeply about the second, third, and subsequent order consequences of things. So, first business was a gym. My first four companies were accidents.
Mm.
It's like I want to get really strong. It's like Forrest Gump, where he just starts running and then a bunch of people are running behind him. It's like I want to get really strong, so I tried, and then it's like, okay, all these people want to do it with me. Cool. Uh, so my first business was gym. My second one was when I decided I wanted to make money, I moved my gym, changed the name to a more fluent area. My third company was a nutrition company. The gym and the nutrition company are still running in Vero Beach, Florida. Uh, my fourth was a consulting company showing other people how to do what I'd done.
Mm.
Hated it all. I hated the fitness industry, and I hadn't written, but I hadn't had this realization yet. So what I realized is I went from small gym that did really well and everybody thinking I was lucky to me wondering if I was lucky,
Mm.
which is why I moved to a more affluent. Somebody told me if you move your gym to Vero Beach, because you got bedhead and you're barefoot and you're a kid, they're going to eat you alive. Just be happy with what you have here. And I couldn't let it go. So I moved my gym to Vero Beach, and we did very, very well. And then somebody asked, do you think it was luck? And I was like, maybe. So I sold my gym, went to Albuquerque, did something else. So for a long time, I was hopping industries because I wanted to escape this. Was it luck, or am I good? Uh, got into business consulting. I had a mastermind. The mastermind. So I sold all my fitness stuff, and I had a lot of money, and I had nothing to do. And all these people were paying all these coaches, and he's like, "Yeah, you should stop paying all those coaches." And like, well, I got to pay somebody. I said, "You could pay me and call me." And I was totally joking because they could call me for free. Uh, and the first lady, it was the first person, was her name is Mallory. She goes, okay. I was like, Mallory, you could just call me for free. You don't have to. She's like, no, but I feel like accountability is all right. Give me $3,000 a month. And at any point, I'll just give it back. So I took $3,000 a month. And then a guy named Bradley Grinnin called. And he's like, what are you doing with Mallory? I want in. I was like, you just called me for free. You don't need my number. Uh, he's like, yeah, but I want to do it. So, okay. I brought Bradley in. In 6 weeks, I had 44 members at $3,000 a month. No structure, no website, no plan. Got lucky again. Uh, And now as I was taking people on, I realized, man, I jump industries all the time. Um, I don't want to get bored. So my only rule for this what became a mastermind called the network, no two people that do the same thing. So I had 44 people in 44 different industries. And the only reason it was capped there is because, somebody would try to come in. I said, sorry, I already have an ads person. I had a farmer from North Dakota. Like we had all kinds of crazy stuff. Uh, and that is when I started realizing um, all the same stuff. You got your farmer, you got your advertiser, you got your, we had a fertility coach, seafood company. And I just, that's when I started, like bumpers started coming to me, realizing like, look, it presents different, you use different language, yada, yada, yada. But the underpinning pattern, it's the same, like the same five fucking things over and over. Excuse my language.
Mm.
Uh, so I did that for a while. And then from that network, I pulled out partners and just started building companies with them. And so now I have majority or more of 11 companies in
Oh.
11 different industries. Um, and we do some, I do some events and some coaching and stuff, but it's mostly been, years and years and years of like happy accidents.
So what was it like that really helped to shift your mindset from perhaps this is just luck to, maybe this is more than luck? What was it?
It was probably so some of my best friends. I'm sitting in Genius Network. Joe's a very good friend of mine. Jeff Moore is a very good friend of mine. He's 56, 57. My best friend on the planet is Dr. Jeff Spencer. He's 73, and he was the performance and mindset coach for all 9 Tour de France victories. Uh, and so it probably was like doing it in all these different industries build some confidence. But I'm always like the whole Dunning Kruger thing. I'm always like, oh gosh, do I think I'm smarter than I am?
Mm.
Uh, Fortunately, the people that I am the closest with, I spend the most time with, have been around the sun 50 or 60 or 70 times. And so it's when I go, hey, I think I see something. And I'll fire up a Zoom with Dr. Jeff and I'll say, this is what I think I see. And I can see it in his face and his tone. And he's like, yeah, that's how it works. And so it's the validation of from people that have, taken twice, almost 3 times as many trips around the sun that I have.
Mhm.
Uh, that's the stuff that I trust to be competence. Is
Yeah, thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of the people listening may be feeling some of that, like whether it's, what has been termed imposter syndrome or maybe doubting themselves, maybe thinking, I got this, I got that because this, situation happened and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, or somebody made it happen for me and I didn't really earn it. That happens a lot also, by the way, in family businesses. I see that a lot where people are kind of doubting it because they were kind of born into the role, if you will. So I want to kind of go back to, for a moment, this concept of bumpers, and really appreciating that bad things haven't happened. And maybe also part of the prevention of bad things happening is the second point, which is, as you said, being able to kind of see consequences far in advance, maybe from taking preventative actions to avoid bad things happening, or lessen the likelihood. But tell us more about that. Like, why is it important for us to appreciate that bad things haven't happened?
Oh, great question. Do you mind if I go back and touch on something you said
Please take your
really
time.
quick? So this is where, and I work with a lot of people. I know you do too. I work with a lot of people that are for sure a lot more talented and intelligent than I am. Um, and what one of the things that I do is just get them out of their own way.
Mm.
And one of the ways they get in their own way to the one of to something you said is understanding that outcome bias, in my opinion, is really dangerous. Meaning, imagine a quadrant, and when somebody makes a good decision and there's a favorable outcome, it makes sense. Duh, made a good decision, got a good outcome. And then when somebody makes a really stupid decision and has an unfavorable outcome, it makes perfect sense to us. Duh, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But there are absolutely scenarios due to time, randomness, whatever, where somebody makes a really stupid decision and has a positive or favorable outcome. And there are also times where you can make a great decision and have a poor outcome. And I think it's very, very dangerous. Again, just my opinion, it's like you and your brother inherit money, you buy a restaurant chain because you're responsible and he buys freaking Dogecoin. Total gamble, right? But then COVID hits and Elon Musk mentions Dogecoin. So your brother is multimillionaire, you're broke, and it is really dangerous to start thinking that maybe he makes better decisions than you do, because he didn't. It's when consulting others. When I go to others, I'm not looking at the outcome, um, because the outcome can be random. It's examining the logic, the reasoning, and the evidence behind the decision, and gauging whether or not it was sound. Totally understanding that. So the point, I suppose, is that I know a lot of really brilliant people that have made the best decision possible given all the data and had a poor outcome.
Mm.
And then they start doubting themselves and they start assigning competence to like internet marketers, uh and that becomes really, really tough place. It's a really tough place to be, uh if you don't, if you think that a poor outcome means you're incompetent and you stop trusting yourself because there was a poor outcome. uh Dangerous place to be. All right, so bumpers, appreciate when bad things don't happen. um the concept came to me, it started crystallizing to me. So it's like bumpers in a bowling alley, uh, where like just keep yourself out of the gutter. And anytime I just talk to so many people and you identify, it's like, well, if I just didn't do this and have to spend 5 years getting back on track, I'd be so much further ahead. If I just didn't binge, pizzas and milkshakes every Sunday, the rest of the week, I'm pretty good. I'd be much further ahead. And it's like, okay, the repeating pattern was if less bad things happened, you would be much further ahead than you are. So why aren't we appreciating or trying to prevent bad things from happening? You see it in medicine. Money's in the cures, not in prevention. It's like, well, nobody wants to buy the prevention, but why? So I just started observing, and I talked to a lot of people. I just try to understand where they're coming from. And it's these really interesting things where if you, and I'm going to use fitness a lot because I spend a lot of time in it. If you have always taken care of your health since you were 14 years old, you've just always been health conscious, and your sister has not. And so let's say you're nice and healthy. When your sister loses 30 pounds, everybody celebrates her. And it's not to say that we shouldn't celebrate that. It's that our dopamine addicted brains get really confused when you're celebrating the person that fell off the wagon and got back on, and nobody's celebrating me for staying on the freaking wagon. And it's like rinse and repeat hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times through our life. And so it's really difficult for us to appreciate when something bad doesn't happen because we actually get so much dopamine. We get so rewarded when we recover from a bad thing. So if we're like, hey, I want some appreciation, dig a hole and then dig yourself back out. Everybody's going to celebrate you. But the amount of resources and time that go into digging the hole and digging yourself back out are tremendous. So that was kind of the whole, if we appreciate recovery so much, why don't we appreciate never needing to recover? And if we did, I believe more people would be incentivized to do less bad stuff or let less bad stuff happen. And if less bad stuff happened, all the resources that went into recovering from bad stuff would have gone into moving forward. And that's the whole crux of it is, can we do that? Can we make avoiding bad stuff sexy? And if so, then you will make progress much faster than you ever have in your life.
And it's really about acknowledging effort, I think. You know, Nick, when I have three daughters, when they were little, I remember going into the pediatrician's office and you see all these little leaflets, you know, on the wall on the side. And I remember looking at one of them and it said in big bold letters, like catch them being good. I think the leaflet was about sibling rivalry. I want to say maybe that was the topic. You know, they have like ear infections, whatever, right? And this was about like catch them being good. And it really was about just acknowledge them wherever there is to acknowledge, even if 1% of the time they're doing the right quote unquote good thing, you know, really milk it, you know, really acknowledge them, and they're much more likely to do it again. We see that in change management, right? That positive reinforcement throughout an entire change is really what's one of the key things that's going to ensure that the change sticks and that people don't revert back to old patterns under stress or uncertainty, those kinds of things. So I really love that you are bringing attention to this. Like we really should celebrate our efforts, our prevention, you know, and yes, when bad things happen, if we are going to appreciate, I think we need to appreciate the learnings that come from those experiences versus just the getting out of the hole, so to speak, as you said, because you know, it's about what are the psychological realignments, like you, right? You've had, I imagine, situations where, you know, you've had some experiences and you learned from them, right? And through those experiences, you realize one day, maybe it's not just luck, right? Maybe you know, I really am more competent. Maybe I have a good reason to believe in myself, right? And so I really appreciate this. And so how do we do this? Like if we now bring this into behavior, what can people do to appreciate that bad things haven't happened?
I think the first one is, and it's a great question because it is the question. How do we get people to appreciate prevention? And that's like the question if you talk about medicine and all that stuff. Uh, the first is, in my mind, we call it the science of hindsight. Can you just look back and say, yeah, if I wouldn't have lost 4 hours arguing about politics, then maybe I wouldn't have missed this opportunity. And you'll probably find things that you are hyper susceptible to. And you can kind of think through, okay, well, if I didn't spend 5 years off track and then 3 years losing the weight again, and I had 8 years, you can kind of do the mental exercise, and identify the things that the things that happen over and over, the recurring things. uh you can't help the random stuff, but we all have propensities to do stuff. And then the easiest thing for me is, and it's in the book, which is establish these non-negotiables just as a starting place where you can look back and go, yeah, every time. One of mine is I don't talk about politics. I don't.
That's one of mine too.
Nothing good comes of it. And so if you can make one decision, like I will never spend time arguing, trying to be right. I will never talk about politics. If it's important to me, so let's say I would say, hey, I really want to get in shape, or I really want to fix this relationship, or I really want to have this business a long time, I won't start anything that I'm not willing to do forever. That one messes people up. But if it's really important to me to get a certain BMI or something, and I do it eating only spinach, but I'm not willing to eat only spinach forever, then I'm a ticking time bomb. Those results are temporary. And so if I can just those three decisions, I'm going to recapture so much bandwidth, and I'm putting myself in a position. That's when bad things happen, when I do those three things. Uh, so if I could just make one decision that makes thousands of decisions for me in the future. Somebody says, hey, you want to talk about politics? Nope. Done. Closed off any possibility of something bad happening uh, in regards to, and nothing good happens when you talk about politics. So that would be the fastest way, in my opinion, is just eliminate the things that you can eliminate right now. Uh, you'll be surprised how much bandwidth you get back.
Yeah, I love it. It's common sense and yet it's not common. So and it's just so much easier when it's objective, right? This is a rule, so to speak, a guideline that I'm going to follow and to commit to it. And it's also so much easier when there's resistance from other people when we are congruent. Because when we stand in our truth and what we value and what's important to us, it's just so much easier to say no, or yes, right? In certain situations. So tell us a little bit about this concept of raising the floor, because I've heard you speak of it before. We talked about it a little bit before we went live, and I would love to have you share it with our audience.
Yeah. And that is one of my favorite. This is actually what I do. Uh, we had incredible results with our gym, nutrition company, business, all that stuff. And this is like the single most powerful concept, in my opinion. I've had people write manuals and books and build tools and spreadsheets and come show me, which is awesome. And the concept is this: most of the things that matter are made up of a rolling average, or an average of some sort, right? So our brain really likes binary winning and losing, and that's a problem because it doesn't account for the rolling average. Um, like if you want to eat 2,000 calories every day, and you do it exactly every day, but then on the seventh day you eat 8,000 calories. Well, energy cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. So that overage it's not 6 wins and 1 loss. It is just a gross overage.
Mm.
And so the brain likes to think win, 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 loss, but it's not, it's like I'm on a budget. So as long as I spend under this much money, most of the time I'm good. And you do that 6 days a week, and then on Sunday you go $1 million over. Yeah. Doesn't matter. You're now in debt. It's not 6 wins and 1 loss. It's just a massive debt. So the first is just thinking about these important things, especially the complex things, as a rolling average. And if we could think of, okay, we just want to increase, we want to improve the way we look, we want to lose weight, we want to gain weight, we want to increase the amount of money in our bank account, then we actually want to improve the rolling average, the line through the graph. There are many ways to improve the rolling average. The hardest, naturally, is the one that we all gravitate towards, which is I want to do better than my best. You hit a PR in the gym and you just want to do better than that. You have a record month and you just want to do better than that. Now, unfortunately, kind of an aside here, but in a complex system, when you hit so if you lift, if you hit a PR, your fastest, whatever, 5K time or your biggest lift, risk adjusted, you're in the worst position you've ever been in. So if you run the fastest race of your life, you're not in great shape afterward. Right. Without fail, after a record month, 3 months later, almost all companies are in a worse position, risk adjusted, because you hit a record month and your brain goes, oh, this is my new trajectory. So you take on expenses as if that's already done. And it doesn't go up. So your risk goes straight up, your cost goes straight up, but your revenue does not. So, first of all, after your best, you are in a very dangerous place. That's okay. It's not bad to do better than your best, but it's a silly thing to strive for a few reasons. One is risk adjusted. You're fragile, always. And two, if we're being honest about reality, not what we think, By definition, your best is the best you have ever done. In your whole entire life, you've been trying. This is the best you've ever done. Can you do better? Probably. Sure. Is it probable? No. Not because I doubt you or I don't believe in you, but because the evidence says out of the thousands of times you've done this, you've done it one time. So trying to do better than your best uh, can be, it's the, it's going to be very, very hard. However, the good news is the fastest, easiest way to raise the rolling average is to raise the floor, the ceiling. All right. So where you sit, your average performance, the money in your bank, all that stuff is somewhere between your ceiling and your floor. And if you raise the floor, the average raises as well. And that's good news because if we use the same science of hindsight and we look at the data, it's really easy. Most of the time, you do better than your worst. Actually, almost all the time. So there's proof that we are very, very capable of doing better than our worst. And it's less resource intensive. So if you're telling me I can raise the rolling average the same amount with less effort and less risk and less resources, then that rolling average, I'll have a higher readiness score. I'll be more prepared for the future if I raise the rolling average by raising the floor. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And then my mind goes to, okay, what about goals then, right? Like if we have specific goals for a specific time frame to reach a certain level, then how does this, concept play with goals?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, so if you think of a goal in my brain, I see shapes. So when I'm talking, I'm just explaining what I see. Think of goals like a channel. Have you ever seen like trading? Like a somebody's like it's like your revenue is going up. It's
Oh
going up,
yeah.
it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, but then on average, you can see that
Uh-huh.
it's going up on average over time. So if I draw a line to all your lows and line to all your highs, that's that channel that you live
Mhm.
in,
Yeah.
right? You kind of follow this trajectory.
Mhm.
So if I set a goal on a graph, and I'm just using this as an example, I would want that channel to reach that goal in the timeline. So we're still raising the floor.
Mhm.
And what gets dangerous if you only push on the ceiling, you just keep pushing on the ceiling, you never raise the floor, is even if you creep that up, you ever like people are the most susceptible after a big win. And a higher ceiling can create a lower valley, a deeper valley,
Yeah.
right? Higher peak, deeper
Yeah.
valley if you're not raising the valley.
Yeah.
So if you fall back into that valley, you're inconsistent.
Mhm.
And it's really tough to hit a goal on a time. Like if that channel is super wide, because you go from like super high to super low to super high to super low, it's much more difficult to reliably hit a goal on a specific timeline
Yeah.
because it's so extreme. Now, if you can raise your floor so high that it's basically your ceiling, this is what we call consistency. You know, like the athletes that even their worst year is still pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So you raise the floor, eventually they're the same. So as you're raising the floor, everything's going up, but you've taken the path that has the highest probability of not burning you out or blowing you up.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of goals. I think the longer the timeline,
Yeah.
the better. Uh, and I'll say this about goals because I mentioned risk. I believe I don't trust anybody that tells me about risk, whether something is risky for me, if they don't know what I want.
Mm.
Because whatever you want, if you say, you tell me the only way, and you mean it, you go have a conversation with yourself on your deathbed, and you're like, yep, I checked. The only way, Elon Musk is a great example. That guy is not going to be happy unless he populates Mars.
Mm.
And so you may say, wow, he's taking a lot of risk. But For him to behave like you, he would never populate Mars. And not getting what you want most out of life is the biggest risk.
Hmm.
Right. So you know what I mean? Like if you need super simple terms, if you needed 12% a year on your money to do to afford the things the most important to you, then putting your money in a safe option that gets 4% is the riskiest thing you can do because you're just guaranteeing you're not going to get what you want. So that's kind of the whole when it comes to goals. I'm not saying be conservative. I'm saying raise the floor. Uh, and you have to take as much risk and push as hard as you need to have the highest probability that you get what you want.
Mhm.
And that's going to look different for everyone.
Yeah, and kind of looping back to the earlier part of our conversation, for us to be able to feel safe enough to be able to do that, and we have to release the doubt, and some, the fear, the doubt, because otherwise we may be frozen, we may get stuck, we may get paralyzed, where we're kind of not, achieving what is most important to us, and or kind of our fullest potential. We're essentially getting in our own way, right? As you kind of said it earlier. So, on that kind of last point that you just made, what do you think is most important for people to be able to do in order to make sure that they are achieving what's most important to them?
Oh, this is why I don't work with a lot of people anymore. It's hard. It's really difficult. And I don't want to say so much of it is simple, not easy. Uh, it's simple. Know what you actually want. That is so much harder in my experience than most people think. And you can gut check yourself. This is how I gut check people anyway. Is we say, okay, what do you want? And prioritize it. Most important thing, meaning if all else fell apart, if you only did this one thing, you'd be okay. And then be like, well, if my wife never had to work again, it's okay, that's your number. What's number two? Well, if I had a house in California, we really want a ranch. What's number three? Yada yada yada. Most of the time, we can engineer it and say, look, it's right there. You could actually take all of this money, put it in an account for your wife. She'd never have to work again. And there's like a pause, and you just realize that's not your number one priority. That's what you think you're supposed to say. That's what because you would feel guilt and shame and all these other things. But if you don't get over it, you will forever have real values and espoused values that are like diametrically, but you can't win. You can't win if you're not being honest about what you want, not what you think you're supposed to say, not what somebody else told you're supposed to want. Religion is tough, parents are tough, all that stuff. Uh, so I think it's just constantly gut checking what you actually want.
How did you know? I mean, you've gone through so many businesses, and at some point you said, I realized I wasn't happy there anymore. I didn't want to be there. Like, how did you know? How do you know what you want?
Ooh, that's a great question. Uh, since you asked me, I'm a little bit of a different. There's a few people that are wired kind of like I am. And if you read the book Finite and Infinite Games, it's a great book. I am pure bred infinite game player. All I want to do is explore everything and see what happens. Now, I build businesses and I do a whole bunch of stuff I don't want to do and I take on obligation. And all of that is to try to put myself in the best position to have as many options in the future as possible. That is the only game that I play. Uh, I built all this other stuff because nobody I work with is that way. They all have things that they actually want.
Mm.
Um, so for me, I just want to keep playing the game.
Yeah.
Uh, I make money so that I can keep playing the game. I make money in the way that I make money. I don't make as much as possible. There's like a ratio of income to long-term obligation. And I try to keep the long-term obligation as small as possible. So I'm not going to sell you something like a 3-year program because I don't want to do this for 3 years.
Yeah. You want freedom, flexibility, all that, the ability to step into any option you want to create or do, sounds like. Yeah.
I gotta touch stuff and learn stuff and be indifferent. I just have to, and that's me.
So how
For
would you guide somebody else then who may be wired differently than you, or maybe the same as you, like as to like, how do I know what I really want, Nick? Because you said so many people have the shoulds or the
Mhm.
coulds, but like, how do we know what's really, like in our heart?
Yeah. So if you're like me, so I'll start there because there's not many of them, and it changes. Like if I had kids, that might be very different. Um, and that could happen. But so if you're like me, the hurdle is being okay with it, is not feeling guilty because somebody's going to say, "What's your 5 year plan?" And you're going, "I don't have one," and then you're going to get judged and all this stuff. So I think for anybody, it's just being okay with who you are. Um, but for the people that might have more obligation or goals, this is what we do. We actually have them, and we use money because it's easy to measure. And most people don't care about money as much as most people think. It's just people don't know how to measure what they care about. So they can't really care about this. And if I had more money, then I could have this. So they go to the thing they know how to count, which is like money and time. But they want the money for something other than to have money. And they want the time for something other than to have time. But we use money and as a gut check. And we do a version of what I just said. Okay, write down your three. What's your number one priority? What is the one thing that's most important to you? It's like, well, as long as I could pay for my kids' college, that's enough. That's the most important thing to me. Cool. How much is that going to cost? Oh, 200 grand. Um, okay. When do you need it? In 3 years. So that's 200 grand in 3 years. I could, anybody in our world, I could just look at their P&L and be like, all right, it's already there. So take this 200, take this right off the top, put in the account. 100% of everything goes into your number one priority till it's funded. It's not like 33% here, 33% there. There's a whole different reason for that. And I would pay attention to them and would want them to pay attention to their reaction. And you're saying, if you're saying, this is the most important thing to me, it's $200,000, and you have $200,000 right here, and you are not throwing it over there, it's not what you want most. Because we've all been in a position where we paid exorbitant amount of money for something on a total impulse because we really fucking wanted it. So it's just being aware of that little like hesitation, and really, if that's really what you wanted most, that money would be there right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we go through that, and we go through that. When I work with people, it's like, hey, we got it straight, and then 3 months later, it's like gut check again, and it changed. And I think as you give people more and more permission to want what they want, they all the stuff that they're hiding or that's stuffed way down there starts to come up. But that's typically what we do.
Yeah. Cool.
Uh,
And I appreciate the kind of putting it into a hierarchy of like what's most important. I remember I did an exercise years ago. I attended this meeting with a neighbor of mine who's a palliative care physician, and there was a meeting training us on something called logotherapy, kind of meaning-based therapy for residents, palliative care residents. And because they work with kind of end-of-life patients. And I remember the exercise was, all right, take a piece of paper and write down everything you want to achieve, let's say in the next 5 years, right? So everybody's writing all these big goals. I want to buy this, I want to do that, and so on. And then the facilitator said, okay, now turn the page around. Imagine you have 8 weeks to live.
mm-hmm.
What's most important? And it's like, almost everything on the list kind of went away, and just one or two things, stayed on the list. And I think that's something that we need to consider is, kind of your question earlier, if you can't have anything else for whatever reason, what needs to say, what's number one? And then after that, what's number two and what's number three? And I think that money, of course, is a form of energy. We can say, you devote, as you said, time, money, learning, do all of our attention to the things that are at the top of the list. That equals congruence. That equals, inner peace because we're investing into something that's important to us, whether it's our body, whether it's our financial well-being, or connection with our family and friends, or whatever that is. And so it's I've heard you say, before we again we recorded, you said the words, you can't win a race you don't want to be in. You can't win a race you don't want to be in. So now that's the flip side of the coin. If I'm working towards something that's not necessarily what's highest and most important for me, then I'm, investing all this time and effort and money potentially on something that might not be it and might not bring me that deeper level of joy and fulfillment that is sustainable, right? It might be something that gives me that dopamine high, as you said, and then, off to the next thing. And that's something that I often see with entrepreneurs is, there's kind of like this addiction to, as you said, the win or the overcoming. Let's say if you fall in the hole and something happens, the bad thing happens, to getting out of the bad thing, right? There's almost this addiction or empowerment that comes from that, this high, when in reality, it's the focusing on what we want and the taking, actions every day, sometimes little actions, right? Every day to move toward that. That's kind of the definition of success that I work with.
Mhm.
It's not, as you said, trying to be the best or be better than I was at my best. It's consistently staying focused. So, Nic, what do you think, as we kind of complete here today, is something that you want all of the kind of listeners to really take away, like at a deep soul level? What what do they need to know in order to really live their highest and best life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I suppose it is exactly that, which is nobody wins a race they don't want to be in. And if you're listening to this, you are an adult. You do not need anybody's permission to want what you want. And whatever you got to do to work through that, I strongly recommend doing it as soon as possible. Uh, because again, if you're listening to this, one, you're probably an adult, and two, you probably work really freaking hard. And if you work as hard as I do, and as everybody listening does, I would want to make pretty damn sure that at the end of it, it was worth it.
Mm.
That's why you work hard, so that it's worth it. And I think it's worth doing the work to figure out what you really want, and then understanding that you have every right in the world to want it. Um, and then doing the work to figure out how to articulate it. And the next thing is you should probably communicate it to the people that matter most to you. That's the other step that people forget to do. They're like, can't they just read my mind? No, nobody can read your mind. Uh, I think that'd be the most important. I bet everybody listening to this, watching this, whatever, is intelligent enough, has enough resources, and is plenty competent to get what they want.
Thank you, Nick. And if the younger you that never got to meet his dad and that kind of struggled with his mom walked into the room that you're in now, looked you in the eye, and you got a chance to share with them something that's going to just make their life even easier, what would you want them to know?
So Lance Armstrong was here a couple of weeks ago. Asked him the same question. I'm gonna steal his answer. Doesn't matter. Younger me wouldn't have listened. But knowing that, if I had the opportunity, I would probably say, trust yourself. It's going to be okay.
Hmm.
No lessons. I wouldn't have listened, but it's going to trust yourself. It's going to be okay. That's
Yeah.
it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. I wish that for all of us. Trust ourselves, it'll be okay. So thank you, Nick. Really, just a huge hug and appreciation for you for taking the time to be with us today. And you just are a big gift for the planet. And how can people learn more about you?
The easiest way is probably to go to either my website or straight to the book. So nicpeterson.com. If you go to bumpersbook.com, it'll take you straight to Amazon. And that's pretty much if you read the book and it's like, wow, this I jive with this, and it's like totally self-evident, then you probably like other stuff that I do, and you can find it all in the book. If you pick up the book and you're like, yeah, not really my thing, it's totally cool.
Well, I read it today and it's certainly my thing, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you again, Nick.
Yeah, appreciate it.